You're listening to the Blind Tiger Record Club podcast, where we champion music of all genres, and we believe vinyl is king. That is one of my all-time favorite songs by the amazing Pixies, Where Is My Mind? This track is off the band's debut studio album, Surfer Rosa, released in March of 1988. It's been a unique standout since it was released and is one of those modern albums whose production sounds great in the vinyl format. It's on a ton of greatest albums list by critics, and we have it available at blindtigerrecordclub.com. Go to the site and check out the store. This episode is brought to you by 85 Supply. 85 Supply is a nationwide supplier of wholesale merchandise. These guys offer over 250,000 different products. They've worked with customers like CMT, Uber, Chick-fil-A, LaCroix, all the way to some of the most popular names in modern entertainment. Whether it's 50 pieces or 100,000 pieces, these guys have you covered. 85 Supply is a hands-on boutique merchandise experience. Check them out at 85supply.com, printing at its finest. This is part 2 of our episode on the greatest albums of 2017. Back in the studio with us today is Cody Driggers and Austin Cox. So let's drop the needle and take a look at these records. All right, let's get cranked up, and we're going to talk about several albums today. The first one, Foo Fighters, Concrete and Gold. So let's go ahead and jump into a song. Let's start with their first single off this, the song called Run.
Wake up, run for your life with me. Wake up, run for your life with me. In another perfect life. In another perfect life. We
One of my favorite things about that song is that it starts off, I mean, it's just very melodic and singable song. You think it's just going to be this nice pop song, you know, kind of just in the space, and then it just rips your face
full
off.
blown headbang.
Totally. Yeah, it starts off and it, you know, the way he's picking the guitar line, it sounds like it's in 6/8 time signature, and then so you get locked into a 6/8, and then the kick comes in with the 4 on the floor, and you're like, I have no idea what time signature this is supposed to be in. Until it kicks in, and then you're like, oh, it was in 4 the whole time. They are smart.
They got pretty experimental on this entire record.
They totally did. And, you know, to me, like, Run rocks as hard as any Foo song. But to me, the record really starts on the next track, on Make It Right. That's kind of where Concrete and Gold really becomes Concrete and Gold. Where Run's just sounds like a single. But kind of the weirdness of the record really comes in on that track.
Train and
sounds like a Beatles song to me.
Well, it's funny you say the Beatles. I've read, it depends on which article you read. The band even describes their album in different ways, but the one thing that's consistent is they keep mashing like older sounds with really hard bands. And so, like, I think, it was NME. They said it was Motorhead meets Sgt. Pepper.
Totally.
That's
And
exactly what we said.
In
first
The
time we listened to it.
Guardian, they said it was Slayer meets Pet Sounds.
That's
Really?
What?
Yeah,
That's
so
really
they-
good.
It really
It's a
is.
good
Like,
description.
I described it as I couldn't decide whether to compare it to like maybe the White Album or Revolver, because there's that kind of aspects I hear of both. Like kind of the more like riffy stuff, like Make It Right comes in and it's got this riff that's playing, and you think it's gonna explode like Run did, except it comes in with this really tight drum groove, and but they're still riffing over it, and it's like that's different.
That was good.
Thank you.
That was good. I like that.
I appreciate that. But yeah, they get this riff started, but then this tight drum beat comes in with it, and that's where it stays. And the riff never blows up. And it's like they tricked me because it's right after Run, so you just expect another banger, and it is a banger, but it's a different kind of banger. That's my favorite song on the record, I think.
It's funny that you guys are even pointing out this kind of pop infusion, because it really that song that you're just talking about, Make It Right, Justin Timberlake is on that song.
Yeah.
So there's all these guests, and it all happened because they were recording in East West in Hollywood, and there was just this natural influx of artists coming and going that were doing things. So on this record, you've got Justin Timberlake on Make It Right, Sean Stockman from Boys to Man is on Concrete and Gold.
Yep.
Alison Mosshart from The Kills is on La Di Da, and Paul McCartney plays drums on the song Rain.
Yep.
Which,
And the
considering
drummer
Dave
sings
Grohl
on-
is a drummer. I mean, it's
Taylor Hawkins actually sings lead vocals on that song. Paul
Yeah.
McCartney played drums, and the drummer sang lead. It's pretty crazy.
You never really know what you're going to get with Foo Fighters. Like 7 members? 6?
Well, right
How
when
many
you
is it?
think you know what you're going to get from the Foo Fighters,
It's a
they
bunch of
release Concrete
Foo.
and Gold.
Well,
Yeah.
and there's so much influence in that band. I mean, from like punk rock to metal, rock and roll. The Beatles is a huge influence on Dave. Chris
Even
Shiflett's
some-
a huge country
yeah,
guy.
even some alt country vibes in certain songs. Not necessarily on Concrete and Gold, but in some of their other stuff. They're all over the board, but they do it right. It's great. I'm a big Foo fan.
with a band like Foo Fighters, who's just, because of their attachment even to just grunge and like the launch of an entire music genre, and they're one of those bands that it's almost hard for someone to absorb a new record and really kind of go, oh, this is great. I mean, it's almost like it needs time.
I think I was there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just like, it's like grunge Seattle area, and okay, Foo Fighters has another album, and then you listen
Right,
to it, and you're
right.
like, whoa, what is this? What do you mean Justin Timberlake's on the album? Like, what?
Yeah.
Right?
This is their weird one for sure. They definitely got experimental.
I like it a lot.
I think it's
That's
cool.
great.
It's not my favorite Foo record, but they do a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah,
on
well,
it.
It's not
let's
much
listen
of-
to another track. I wanted to play "Sky Is a Neighborhood." It's another one to me that's got these really cool chorus. I mean, it's like you're saying, it's just like completely different to me than.
Yeah, a lot of layered,
Yeah.
stacked vocals, very Beatles, Beach Boys kind of vocal stuff going on. It's a cool track. Weird chord
This must be
progressions.
the Pet Sounds, thing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So, with all the chorus effects they have. So anyway, let's listen to that one.
Sky is a neighborhood, so keep it down. Heart is a storybook, a star burned out. Sky is a neighborhood, don't make a sound. Lights coming up ahead, don't look now. The sky
great, man.
That's like an anthem at a show, right? Where you can
Totally.
just look out and just see everybody just singing those words along with you. You know, it's a singable song, yet just so much creativity built inside of it.
And then Dave's vocals, to me, the way he attacks the verses are just so different. It's just a really cool song.
It's cool. And they did this record. I can't remember his name, but he's a pop producer that they did this record with, which is different. Like, to go in there and try to record like a banging rock record with a pop producer.
Yeah,
it's
Greg
gonna be
Kurstin.
weird.
Was
And
this an analog record again, like their last one? Or was
I
this...
don't know.
Yeah, so Greg Kurstin produced it, and I know he's done stuff like I don't know whole albums he's done, but he's worked on a lot of pop tracks. Like he worked on a big Adele song, just a lot of stuff in that space. And so yeah, I think the reason Dave reached out to him was because ironically it wasn't as much a pop thing. It was an indie band that he had been producing that he was really into, and so he reached out to him and then ended up doing this record. But
Yep, it's great. I really enjoy it.
all right, well, let's go ahead and start talking about the next artist, Margot Price, and her record All American Made.
I like what Margot's doing a lot. Like, she's doing real country in a world where the real country is becoming more and more rare. Well, actually, it's kind of making a comeback, which is awesome. But for a long time, it's been pop production with kind of a twang in the voice, maybe a banjo buried in the mix, and somewhere mentioning of a pickup truck. That's been country music for the last, 15 years.
Oh, yeah.
And here comes Margot with, number one, she's a woman, which is awesome.
On Third Man.
Yeah, and she's on Third Man Records. Shout out to Third Man Records for taking a chance on country music, which is, not something they had done up until that point.
I mean, they are in Nashville, but they're not a country label.
Right,
so.
yeah. Like Jack's from Detroit, and all their, a lot of their staff and label heads are all from Detroit. So, they relocated to Nashville and are diving into that whole scene now. But I love what she's doing. It's real. It's real instruments, real people. She's not afraid to speak her mind and be controversial or potentially offensive, which I always dig that. I always lean on real.
It's very punk rock.
Yeah, punk rock mentality. It's great. She's just doing her thing.
Well, let's listen to Little Pain.
I'm so tired, but I can't sleep. Too many obligations I'm trying to keep. Gotta please everybody except for myself. But like leave on set, ain't in it for my health. Everyone thinks it's no work, no fun, but a little pain never hurt anyone. Little pain never hurt anyone.
That song is cool. It's almost a rock song, almost. It's got country instrumentation and feel, but it's kind of set up almost like a old school rock and roll song.
She had a lot of different classic country vibes. She has some cosmic country sounds on the record. She does that duet with Willie Nelson. That's super classic.
It's really cool for a girl that came out of one of the smallest towns in Illinois, to going to Detroit and spent so much of her life in the upper Midwest to end up finding her place in Nashville, and just epitomizes in a very good way the scene here in Nashville, the country music. Yet she's her own, right?
Yep.
She's doing her own thing. She's not following trends, not following crowds, and
Right.
I think country music needed Margot Price. This is the perfect time for this record and her last record to come out. She's one of the few women that are doing that right now. And even with all the success that she's had over the last few years, she still hasn't really been recognized for it, at least not in the mainstream country world.
Yeah, not in country. I mean, she kind of like Jason Isbell. I mean, she's definitely known in Americana circles.
Yep.
So she's done well there, and I think is finding with this record a more commercial appeal. Maybe without the commercial radio support, but still finding critically crossing into other genres.
And something good to note on her records being one of the popular, everyone wants to call them the new outlaw country artists. This is one of the only records that Dave Cobb didn't produce out of those handful of artists, which is pretty cool. I love the sound of that record. Very I mean, kind of the same deal. It's
Organic.
raw,
Yep.
simple.
I appreciate it. I mean, she's like Loretta Lynn.
Oh, yeah.
You know, reincarnate. Loretta Lynn is still alive, but you know what I'm saying. It's like the same vibes. She's talking about her. You know, her lyrics stem from her own experience.
Oh, yeah.
She's not really trying to impress anybody with what she's talking about. It's just how she feels about, you know, life as she sees it.
She just seems like a very confident person in from lyrically music content. She just knows where she wants to go and just attacks it. And
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
just does a wonderful job. So, should we listen to another song?
Yeah. Which one you want to hear? Weakness?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
It's the Weakness.
Sometimes I'm genuine, sometimes I'm James Dean. Sometimes I'm my only friend and my own worst enemy. My right hand never knows what my left one's gonna do, but I never meant to cause the harm that I have done to you.
All right.
I love
beautiful.
it. I love it.
That one definitely reminds me of Loretta Lynn.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean,
Everything country.
It's great, man.
In all good senses of
It's
you know, just-
refreshing.
yeah.
It's refreshing.
she-
You don't have to listen to music that came out decades ago anymore to get that feel.
No.
You know, you got
I mean, her
people like
vibrato
Margo.
is slightly like Dolly Parton. So I mean, it really is like
I was
this
just
grassy-
thinking
very
about
much
that
so.
when I first
Yeah.
heard it. Like, you just got this Dolly Parton-esque kind of like right in the beginning of the song.
Yeah,
which is-
it's right when she hits that vibrato. That's the part. And but then the way that she kind of does her diction when she really goes country like that song, like it really sounds like Loretta Lynn.
Yep.
So yeah,
It's great. And she just sold out multiple nights at the Ryman,
it was really awesome.
which is
to
so
see.
good. I didn't
Yeah.
realize she was that big.
Yeah.
I saw that she was, you know, doing a show at the Ryman and it sold out in like a day, and then they added another, and then they added another. That's freaking crazy. It's
Yeah,
so
I
awesome.
think she was maybe even a little surprised at that in a good way, you know, and it was cool to see. It really was.
I mean, she has a really good thing going on. I think she gains more fans every time she plays somewhere because I went to see her last year, 4th of July, in Dallas with on the Willie Nelson's tour. And I went with my parents, and they'd never heard her before. And after the show, you know, my mom and my dad were buying shirts and records and everything. They were so stoked.
Yeah.
Like, man, I didn't realize anyone like young was playing this style of country anymore, which is really, really rad. And writing about like relevant things for today's culture. You know, she really dug in on that for this record.
I just love it that you threw in the word rad when we were talking about country music. It's so cool.
Yeah,
It just
I mean,
fits.
she's got songs like, I mean, she's not afraid to speak her mind and talk about things that are important to her. Like a song "Pay Gap" is, you know, calling out. It's talking about.
Would you call it rad?
I would call it rad. Yeah, talking about you know equal pay in the workforce for women, and you know she gets political on stuff, which is not super popular in country music unless it's.
Yeah, country music is known for staying with safe topics.
Totally,
technical
or
topics.
Or at the
or
very least, you know, leaning heavy for, let's just say, patriotic, to say, you know,
Yeah.
if we don't
Totally.
want to say
Absolutely,
conservative.
absolutely.
You could
But
use
like-
that argument to say that could be a reason why they don't get as much recognition in the mainstream world. You know, like with Jason Isbell, with like on his newest record, was it White Man's World?
Yeah.
Stuff like that, you know. and-
It's not popular topics in popular
No.
country music. It's not conservative. It's not necessarily patriotic. I mean, it depends on who you're asking whether
Yeah.
or not it's patriotic.
Yeah.
But probably not to a lot of people who listen to modern country.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of younger Americana artists coming out and writing about what's important to them, not necessarily writing about what sells.
Right.
And that's, I don't know, I think it's fun. I love it.
I do too. As frustrated as I tend to get sometimes with like the current state of a lot of popular music, and then we get to talking about somebody like Margo. It's like, nope, it's still alive. The dream lives on.
Yeah, country music's definitely taking a turn, and I think you're seeing their influence even in the mainstream world with artists like Midland and stuff gaining popularity. Hopefully, we'll see more kind of Americana artists that are doing stuff like Margo put out more records over the next few years, and maybe we'll hear more of that on radio in the
be great.
future.
Man, I could just like listen to you guys talk about this album forever. This is great. I mean,
I'll
just-
talk
there's
about
so
country music all day,
just
man. I
love it. I love it. It's so great.
All right, let's switch gears to the next artist. Let's talk about Matt Mays, one of my favorite artists, and we're going to talk about his most recent record, Once Upon a Hell of a Time. So let's just jump straight to music. Let's go ahead and play Faint of Heart.
A doves still fly, our doves still sing. For this kind of love is a vicious thing. 'Cause all they ever wanted, all they ever need is your crazy love.
Well, that's Matt Mays, and some of you may be hearing him for the first time because he's not super well known. He's a Canadian artist, and
You don't have a problem with Canada, do you?
I not want to listen to Matt Mays.
Okay, good.
But other times you do.
He's an artist I feel like I wish I could just have a ton of his records, and every time I see someone and they don't know who he is, I want to give him one. I fell in love with his music in 2008 when he put out a album called Terminal Romance.
You know, there's
And-
about 35 people listening to this podcast right now that just raised their hand because they wanted to let you know that they have no idea who Matt Mays is. And since you're going to give them a free album, they're all just like, hey,
as long as
I'll
it stays
take one.
under 40, it's okay.
I'll take-
But he had a album that came out in 2008 called Terminal Romance, and that's when I started listening to him and went and got all of his original work and everything since. And to me, it feels like what used to be really common. There was a lot of singer-songwriter rock and roll, and it's in the same vein to me as like, you know, Butch Walker and Ryan Adams. And I mean, if you like that kind of singer-songwriter that goes to rock and roll and kind of sometimes, you know, has like dark and moody lyrics, you know, it's what Matt Mays does, and he's great. And so yeah, I mean, that's I think it's an outstanding record.
His voice is really cool
Yeah, he does a lot of
for a Canadian.
He produces all of his own stuff, and something I always notice on all the records is he has a lot of, I don't know what effect he puts on his vocal, but it's a really cool treatment.
Yeah, it's like slightly distorted.
Yeah, and the guitar stuff is great.
Yeah, Canadian
too.
distortion, you know. Right? Sorry. Digressing.
Sorry, Canada.
Sorry, Canada.
I listened to this record. David actually sent it home with me, just like he said he would do for all of you, lucky listeners out there. He's like, you got to take this home and listen to this. So I listened through it, and I liked it. But this record totally could have come out in the 90s.
Yeah.
It totally could have. I likened it to like the New Radicals. You remember the New Radicals in the 90s? Yeah. That's what it reminded me of.
What do you mean by that? What do you
It
mean?
just kind of had the same vibe, kind of the same sounds and kind of song structure, just kind of overall feel. It totally could have. It could have been. It reminded me of. Remember that? Don't let go. You got the music in you. That New Radical song. Yeah. I was like, those could have swapped. Like New Radicals could have had a Matt May song on their record and vice versa. I don't know. It just reminded me of that.
That's cool.
That's where my brain went.
Yeah, definitely not from a production standpoint though, because that was a lot more.
It was
like clean pop production on New Radicals, but this is yeah.
But as far as the songs go, like the songs,
the song structure,
each other. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. The last record he put out was Coyote, which came out in 2012. So there's this one, you know, released in the end of 2017. So there's a 5-year gap, and during that time, you know, it's just like a lot of these songwriters we've been talking about. Like he went through a lot of personal stuff, and a lot of that is lyrically, you know, presented on this album. So it is a little bit like pensive and somewhat brooding, but yet melodically, it's always like somehow positive and like kind of upbeat. And it just, you know, it's another one that I just think is great driving music. Mm-hmm. If you want to put it in the car and go on a trip, like this is a good road trip music.
Driving and crying.
Yeah,
no, that's my move. That's what I do.
Let's play another track by him. This one's called Ola Vola, which
come again?
Ola Vola, and it's actually the name of the artist that did the artwork on the cover of his record, which is a really cool.
Is that
cover
French for Matt Mays? Since we're talking about Canada,
I'm sure it probably has a root in French, but. But anyway, that's the artist that did the cover, and the cover looks great. It's a really cool looking album. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. But let's listen to the track.
Her name is Ola Volo. She paints the masterpieces. She knows of another dimension, another world where time is suspended.
There's Ola Vola by Matt Mays. You need to check him out.
What was that?
Ola Vola.
Vola.
All right, well, let's jump to our last artist here.
We actually saved the best for last, did we not?
Well,
depends on who you ask.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And in this case,
hey, Dave, ask me.
you'll probably find a chorus of people that say yes, but we're going to talk about Chris Stapleton, who has had a phenomenal run here since his debut record, and congratulations to him as well. He took home 3 Grammys this year, and so
Good job.
but we're going to talk about Chris Stapleton's new album, From a Room to, and I did stress the A because it is not from a room like as in any room in your house. It is from Studio A at RCA Studios. So let's talk about that record, guys.
I love it.
It's amazing.
It's great.
It's wonderful.
It's good. Exceptionally good.
It's awesome.
I'm a big Stapleton fan. I have been for a long time, not just since Traveler, everyone. I'm one of the OGs from the Steel Drivers days.
Yes.
He was in a bluegrass band for a long time called the Steel Drivers. I was a huge Steel Drivers fan. And then he left the Steel Drivers to focus on songwriting, and he did songwriting for a long time. He's had so many singles you've heard and never knew he wrote. And then he was also in a rock band for a while called the Johnson Brothers, which was really good. And then he came out with his first solo record, Traveler. I was stoked to hear it. It was out for a while before it really caught on, too. Anyway, all that to say, I've been on the Stapleton train for a long time. Dude is a genius. He's
I mean, if you're listening to this podcast and you have not heard of Chris Stapleton, I want you to pause this podcast, go buy a Chris Stapleton vinyl record, come back, and then you can tell everybody you finally arrived, because that really, it does that to you, because it did that to me. I'm the one in the room that was never a huge country fan. I grew up listening to country music I just did not like, and I got shoved down my throat, and then all of a sudden, I found Chris Stapleton, and my world completely changed, and all of a sudden I began to give country music all the credit that it deserved, and it happened with this guy, Chris Stapleton. So if you were in my ballpark, in my world, and you weren't necessarily a big country fan, maybe you like rock and you like metal, you never gave country a listen, you're doing yourself a major injustice by not giving Chris Stapleton a listen, because this guy is absolutely off the charts. I believe we said he was amazing and awesome and incredible and exceptionally good.
He doesn't fit in the box. He doesn't fit in the country box.
I think he's the next, like, I don't know, would you say it's like the next big country crossover? Like,
For sure.
You know, like Garth Brooks just kind of turned country into like arenas and all that stuff. Stapleton's selling out arenas now.
He's killing it. He's good. I'm stoked he's finally getting the recognition that he deserves, because he's absolutely the real deal, 100%. His new record is great. I mean, Part 1 was awesome. Part 2 is awesome. I think I'm partial to Part 2 if I had to choose.
I think I like Volume 2 as well. I think that's my favorite.
Well,
It's
you
super
referenced the Steel Drivers. You wanna compare a couple songs there?
Yeah. So on From A Room Volume 2, there's a song called Midnight Train to Memphis, which is actually a cover of a Steel Drivers song. Let me remind you, the Steel Drivers were a bluegrass band. Have you heard Midnight Train to Memphis? It is a rock song. So listening to the song side by side is awesome, hearing how because even the bluegrass one sounded like it should have been a rock song. It sounded like it was written to be a rock song, and then they did it with acoustic instruments and banjo and fiddle. And now it's like he's covering it and re-recording it maybe the way it was originally intended to be heard, maybe. Because Midnight Train as a bluegrass song was always interesting. It was like, this isn't really a bluegrass song. It sounds like a rock song.
All right, so let's play the Steel Drivers version, and then we'll follow it up with Chris Stapleton's Room A version.
Well, Judge looked down, gave me 40 days instead of the fine that I could not pay. Said walk right, you'll soon be home. Cross the line and you're on your own. 40 days, a shotgun and barbed wire fences. 49 just said listen to the midnight train to Memphis.
That's pretty cool to listen to those back to back. I think the Steel Drivers record came out in like mid 2000s, I think. So he sat on that one for a long time before re-recording it, because he had a chance on Traveler, he had a chance on Volume 1, and he chose to wait this long to do it. It was worth the wait. That rock version is so awesome.
It's great.
So anyway, you can see that he's not your typical country artist. He definitely has some rock and roll influence in there, which is great. I always appreciate that.
That raspy, bluesy vocal sound will just catch you.
His vocal is undeniable, man.
He's got that southern rock vibe, like Black Crowes on like steroids.
Yeah, and you can hear that in his Johnson Brothers project too. They were just kind of a blues rock band before he did
I
a solo
actually
record.
have a theory that the reason he was so successful as a songwriter is he would demo the tracks, and then another artist would hear it, and they would be so, just like captured by his vocal that they were like, "Oh, I've got to do this song."
Totally.
I actually read an interview that the person that pitches his songs wouldn't let him demo anymore because the artist would hear Stapleton sing it and be like, I can't do that. Yeah,
That's the
and
way it should
it would bum him out on the song.
I used to search YouTube videos for like bootleg videos of writers' rounds of him, performing songs he's written for other artists, just so I could hear him sing them and be like, well, I wish it was recorded with him.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, like he's had over 150 cuts by other artists. So we're not talking about he had, a hit here or there. I mean, 150 songs of his have been cut by others.
150, that's staggering.
I think that's why he's so
massive
popular,
number.
aside from being like, probably one of the best singers alive right now, in my opinion. He's been writing for these pop country artists for so long, and now he's doing his own thing. I think his influences come from more of the classic country, but he's been writing pop, so it's like there's that pop sensibility to even the like grittiest of rock tracks that he puts out. It's something for everybody, I think.
And he knows how to write hits too, because out of those 150, he had 6 number ones.
Wow.
So he definitely is another prolific songwriter. But and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about Jason Isbell. But Dave Cobb has produced all of his records. He produced this one, and I think it's he lets Stapleton's vocals, which are amazing, just sit out in front of all the music. And that's what even on a rock track like that, where you're kind of listening to the cool guitar hook and the riff, it's still his vocal that you're drawn to. And that the thing that is interesting in that side by side comparison is even in the Bluegrass one, the part I was drawn immediately to was his vocal.
Yep.
Again. So,
Yeah, that was the best part of the Steel Drivers. Even was I loved the players in that band, but it was his vocal that made that band so great.
I think for me, the one thing that I want to make sure that we don't miss in this conversation is, I was talking about how I was not into country. I mean, I was into rock and metal and anything heavy, and I just despised country for the longest time. And then somebody showed me, Tennessee Whiskey, and then I went onto YouTube and I saw him doing it with Justin Timberlake, and I was like, what is this? What have I missed? And I absolutely fell in love. And there's not a bad song on this album, on any of his albums. I mean, that's why so many people.
No throwaway track. He didn't even write them, I don't think.
I mean, that's why so many people have used him to write their songs. It's just he just has that skill that everybody else wishes they had. Right, and you just write a great song every single time. Something
I'm kind of excited about, something to note on From A Room Volume 1 and 2, a lot of these songs were written over the last 5-6 years with his buddy in the Steel Drivers. So a lot of these actually weren't new cuts. He'd been sitting on these in his catalog for a while, which has me really excited for. I mean, we already had 2 Stapleton records this year. It's a little too early to be excited about another one. But, this isn't even new material for him.
He's pulling out stuff he's on Volume 1, he covered a song that he wrote for Leanne Womack that she cut. Mm-hmm. And then he cut it himself. It's like a song that he wrote, but for someone else, and now he's performing it himself on Volume 1. That's the song Either Way.
Yeah, that
which
Kevin
is great.
Welch cover, Millionaire, on this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're familiar with Leanne Womack's song Either Way, Chris wrote that, but his version is just freaking fantastic.
Well, let's listen to one more song. What you guys want to hear?
Oh, man. I'm a big fan of Scarecrow in the Garden because it kind of throws back to a lot we were saying about Isbell with his story songs and his character development within his songs. This is definitely a story song. It's definitely dark and spooky, and if you follow along to the lyrics, you hear a story about a guy who's inherited a farm, and he talks about where his parents come from. They were immigrants, and he's taken over this farm, and he's struggling to keep it together, and there's people coming after his land and all. It's a really cool story, really spooky.
Awesome. Let's listen.
Well, it came from Northern Ireland, searching for the free man's ground. And he came to bet his fortune on a West Virginia plow. He built a house of timber and raised a redhead son. Then they worked the land together and prayed the rain would come. There's a scarecrow in the garden that looks like Lucifer. I've been reading Revelation with my bare feet in blue.
You can't go wrong. Every song is great. Everything he touches turns to gold. You just can't beat it. Do yourself a favor. Get into the Stapleton.
Well, I think it's a great artist to wrap up with, and we've talked about a lot of records over this podcast, and once again, just really appreciate Cody Driggers and Austin Cox joining us, myself and Greg Hayes. Just appreciate you guys coming in and talking through these records.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
It's very, very great to know that there are so many good artists and records still coming out, and I think we hit on a lot of albums that fall in the spaces that aren't the biggest commercial spots for some of these, and it's really great to see them still finding a home. So
Yeah, and the thought that we're doing, our best 10 albums of 2017, I think just that concept kind of here on the tail end of the podcast, saying that these are all 2017 albums.
Absolutely.
Right? This is not old stuff. This is all things that just came out, just released. So if you're just now getting into vinyl, you just got that vinyl record player this last Christmas, or somebody gave it one as a gift, or you were smart and went out and bought one yourself, you need to jump on some of these albums and purchase some of them. And you can jump onto our website, blindtigerrecordclub.com. Thanks once again for you guys for all your insight.
Yeah, man.
It was a wealth of information.
Yeah, no problem, man. Rock and roll forever.
Also, it's 2018 and we're talking about buying vinyl records. That's pretty awesome.
That's pretty rad, I think.
That's
is what
pretty
we wanted
rad.
to say.
It's
Yeah.
rad.
It is rad.
I'd put that in the rad category.
All right. Well, until next time.
Tune in next week while we talk about the deep state and the liberal agenda.
The rains just seem to flood.
Once again, thanks for listening to the Blind Tiger Record Club podcast. We want to thank our sponsors, 85 Supply, Sidecart, and don't forget, you can go to blindtigerrecordclub.com to check out any of the records we've talked about. And for all of our listeners, we'll give you a special coupon code, BTRC50. Type in BTRC50 in the coupon code at checkout, and you can get 50% off your first box. blindtigerrecordclub.com.
In my ride.